Welcome to episode 55 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Aaron Hale. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Gavin.
No problem. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
Fantastic. Now, we are doing a remote recording. I'm here in the UK, and whereabouts are you in the world?
I'm in the Florida Panhandle in the United States.
Oh, nice, nice. Now, it is a real great honor to have you on the show because we've been back and forth a little bit to get this underway, booked in for both of us. And I will kind of like start off just by letting everybody know that I may speak slower and may speak a little bit more enunciation. I don't know if that's actually the right word for Aaron. As Aaron, do you want to share a little bit about your current life situation?
Sure, of course. Uh, I am 100% blind. These are prosthetic eyes for those watching. And my ears are 100% turned off as well. I'd be pulling the full Helen Keller if it weren't for technology today. So the only reason I'm able to communicate with you today, Gavin, is through this cochlear implant in my left ear, which isn't like it isn't a hearing aid. It doesn't amplify sound down the ear canal. It's actually a digital signal that goes by this tether by magnet right to uh, my auditory nerve in the cochlea.
Okay. That is very, very clever, I believe, from my perspective anyway. And we'll come into the reason why that occurred. But we will start off with the four questions at the beginning of every episode. And I'll do these one at a time for you, Aaron. Okay. So the first question is, when did you join the military?
I joined the U.S. Navy in 9/9/99, September 9th, 1999.
Nice. That's a that's a good number to help remember. And you mentioned the Navy there. So the next question is, what service and branch did you join?
Well, like I said, I actually joined the Navy, but later transferred over to the U.S. Army. So I've been in two different branches.
Two different branches. And what was your role within the Navy? When did you join? When you joined up?
Well, I started as a cook in the Navy. And
As a
then when I switched over to the Army, I became an EOD technician, Army's Bomb Squad.
Wow, that's going to be really cool to hear the difference because yeah, they are very different ends of the scale.
It's
Now, the
quite a
third
bit.
question is, how long did you serve for? And that can be combined if you want to.
Combined total, about 14 years.
Nice. And lastly, what rank did you get to?
Staff sergeant.
Staff sergeant. All right. Well, what we're going to do, Aaron, is we're going to rewind the clock and ask, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Dayton, Ohio, and grew up mostly in Akron, Ohio, moving around a little bit.
Nice. And how was your life as a child? Did you enjoy particular sports or academic side of things?
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. We have an artist here, Norman Rockwell, and I kind of grew up in a uh, Rockwellian kind of an America. Apple pie and gazebos and yeah, country bands and apple bobbing and that kind of stuff out in rural Ohio, Northeast Ohio. It's fantastic. I loved growing up, and it's like the suburbs of the suburbs, you know, and lots of woods, lots of places for kids to run around and break things. And yeah, I played sports, played football, wrestled, lacrosse.
Nice. That's one part of America I've not visited yet. But one time, one day, I will probably venture there. Plan to go and see all of America at some point. Not in one go, but across my the rest of my life. So,
Clarification: that's American gridiron football.
oh, okay. Oh, really? Really? Okay. Okay. Now, we have you on the show because you are a veteran. You served, but did you have family members that served in the military?
Yes, I did. Both of my grandfathers served. One in the Army as a paratrooper, and one in the U.S. Air Force's predecessor, the Army Air Corps.
Okay. And were stories from them what kind of enticed you to join the military yourself?
I didn't really know either of them much. My maternal grandfather died before I was born, and my paternal grandfather uh, but my father and my grandfather had a falling out.
Okay.
So I did know that he served in Korea. I didn't really get much of the background from him, unfortunately. But I was the kind of person growing up that absolutely knew up until about a month before I joined the military that I would never be in the military.
Oh, really? Okay, okay. So what was it then? What was it that made you decide to go down that route in life of joining the Navy, I guess, to start with?
A complete catastrophe of educational career in university. I just made a complete botchery of the experience. I went to find Animal House, and found Animal House. I did, and it was just a complete failure on my part. But when I left without a diploma, I was ashamed. I was embarrassed, of course, and I needed to get my act together. So I I also decided that the second time around I would go back. I would become a chef actually, and you know I would do it right. However, I just literally pissed away my tuition and needed to get that money back or find tuition money somewhere else. So the U.S. Montgomery GI Bill pays for college education with after 4 years of service.
Okay.
So I decided I'd join the military.
Right, right. So it was more of a try and get money back than maybe wanting to be within the Navy in itself for that surf in the open ocean as such.
In part, part of it was just to join for the tuition, but also to get those internal uh, core values, strengths, skills, work ethic,
Okay,
and pride in hard work and accomplishment, which I didn't have.
fair, fair. So you did a bit of research yourself. You did do some research.
That's right.
That's brilliant. So when you did join, I'm not too sure what the joining of the Navy, the US Navy, is like compared to the Royal Navy, but was there a particular fitness level you had to be at? And were you quite a fit person at that point?
I certainly did need to maintain a minimum standard, but it is the Navy as a cook, and we have two physical fitness tests a year, and we call it the 3 mile a year club because each test is 1.5 miles long. And I was probably the fittest among all the cooks. It was a strenuous test, let's say. Uh, that was personally though I'd like to maintain a certain level of fitness, so I would work out on my own, and but it wasn't anything, say like a Navy SEALs or special operations. I was still a cook.
Now you mentioned being a chef, a cook inside the US Navy, and you also mentioned about going to schooling to learn that before you joined up. So was there this kind of interest, excitement for cooking for others, or where did that come from?
My whole family has I think it's my mother's side. All have a very creative, artistic gene, a streak in them. My mom is incredible with paints and sketches and watercolors and all sorts of visual art. My brother also was just an incredible artist. And it goes up the line. Me, I also enjoyed those visual arts, but my creative spirit actually led me right into the kitchen. I loved uh, creating delicious, beautiful food, and especially because I love eating as well. But uh, I loved creating joy for others through food.
Okay. Oh, nice, nice. And so when you did join, how did you find, I wanna call it basic training, that's what we would call it. Is that what it is called in the US Navy, the basic
That's right.
training? Yeah?
Basic training, or the colloquialism boot camp.
Boot
But yeah, went to Navy Basic. It's at Great Lakes outside Chicago, Illinois. And it was, I thought it was fun. I thought it was a place to learn the Navy standards and core values and the ethos and the dogma and the tradition. And of course, to get some very out of shape recruits into some semblance of military fitness. And I loved it. Having been on many teams, sport teams growing up, it was great. It was you were on another team, uh, getting fit, getting ready for the fight,
yeah,
and I enjoyed it.
that is cool, that is cool. And was there a particular thing you kind of excelled at when you were going through the training?
You know what was funny? The very first day when all the recruits are in this giant barracks, open bay barracks, there was 80 of us in there, and they asked for anyone who had any college experience, and only two people raised their hands. And they called me and the other guy up and asked how much it was. And my 3 semesters of uh, university, college, I guess trumped the other person's. I don't know what he had, so, a couple distance learning classes or something. And I became the recruit division chief petty officer. Uh, I was in charge of all 80 of them. You're the boss. What?
Nice.
And then they asked, what was the job you were going into after basic training? And I said cook. And they said, we just made a cook the chief.
Oh, that's so good. Maybe
And
that's the first time
that was actually the history. That's how my entire Navy, actually my entire military career went. I just got promoted well before I was even ready, or I don't know, even aware I was going to be.
oh, amazing. Now after you've done the boot camp, the basic camp, basic training, uh, do you go off to like we call it in the military, especially Royal Engineers within the army, we go off to do trade training. So would you have to go off and do cook training for a period of time to learn how to cook for mass numbers?
For the Navy, they call it mess management specialist. When I enlisted, then they reclassified it. They changed it to culinary specialist. I guess mess management specialist was a mouthful, but uh, it's mostly they call it the initial training A school. But the A school for cooks is mostly how not to kill somebody.
With food, you mean?
It's almost all read these recipe cards, make it to the lowest common denominator. So you can't make everybody happy. So make everybody at least not, just make it as bland and dull as possible. It just,
Fair enough.
and here, and then the rest of the school was sanitation standards. Keep things clean, and here are all the food illness intoxications.
That's still quite complicated for someone like me that doesn't cook at all. um, you know, it's something to learn in itself, right? Especially when you are dealing with vast numbers, because I'm guessing as a cook in the Navy, you're cooking for what, a few hundred, maybe more?
Uh, it all depended where I was going to be. And of course, they don't tell you at the recruiter's office or even in the A school. But at the time, uh, the culinary specialists were the Navy's equivalent of hotel restaurant management. So our restaurants would be Navy ships, and the galleys on the ships, and the hotel part was our shore duty, because on all the shore bases it was civilians that ran the chow halls, the dining
Okay.
facilities. So they put us in the barracks, which our version of the hotel. So my first duty station was bachelor enlisted quarters, Naples, Italy. So I wasn't cooking for anybody.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you headed out to Italy as your first, now we call it posting. I think, is it called orders, or what do you call it when you get told to go somewhere as a place to live, I suppose?
Well, they've got the enlisted quarters, then they've got the officer quarters, and then, of course, they've got the temporary lodging, like the Navy Inn and Navy Lodge, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then once you reach a certain rank, then you can find off base housing on your own.
Oh,
But
fair. Yeah.
I was interested at the time. I was interested in cooking, so I. In fact, it was funny. My working hours, they even put me in the maintenance office. So I was the guy who took the trouble call tickets from the front desk and went over to the public works guys, all the Napolitan roughnecks, electricians, plumbers, and escort them around the barracks. So I learned Italian, Napolitan Italian, which is kind of like I don't know, it's like Spanglish or uh, Ebonics for Italian. So I would just point at everything and say "Come si dice? Come si dice?" And that's how I learned Italian. But on my off time, I volunteered for the base commander cooking receptions at his villa, or doing that kind of thing to keep my skills up and kind of endear myself to the base commander, because the next 2 years after my first duty station, I I kind of won a position as the commander of the Sixth Fleet's private mess. So I
Wow.
went from barracks maintenance guy to personal chef of a three-star admiral.
Wow. I bet that's, a bit of an honor, maybe, perhaps, going to do that kind of role?
I'm sorry, say that again.
I was gonna I asked if that was a little bit of a privilege, a bit of an honor for yourself to be selected to do that.
It was. It was. It was. It was definitely a point of pride for me, because in my entire Navy career, 8 years, I never cooked in a real ship's galley.
Oh, wow.
No, most of my peers that came out of that A school went to those large carriers, aircraft carriers with
Mhm.
thousands of personnel. I went to the barracks, and then I cooked for the admiral and maybe 35 of his top staff.
Wow. Now, when it comes to that level of, chefing, again, don't know if that's the right terminology. Um, do you get to choose what's being cooked, or is it kind of whatever the general wants, he gets?
Uh, you get he gets his approval, and he has his preferences, but you don't ask the admiral what he wants for breakfast, lunch, and dinner throughout the entire month. We just say, here's the proposed menu plan. Is there anything on here you disagree with? And
Fair enough.
you get to know his preferences. I actually cooked for two admirals during my stint on the flagship, and they both happened to be these old crusty pirates, and they were burger and fries guys. Yeah,
Fair
it
enough.
was pretty good to keep them happy. I had one standing order though. Whenever the ship was in home port in Gaeta, Italy, we were not allowed to make Italian food.
Oh, wow, okay. That's pretty simple orders to, abide by, I guess.
It's actually quite a shame because I was really enjoying learning how to cook Italian food in Italy.
Uh,
But the flagship, most of the time, it's in port. It doesn't do those huge 6 month cruises like that. The carrier fleets. It would pull out of port every once in a while, go float around the Mediterranean for about a month, pull into two or three different ports, and then come right back to home port. But
mhm,
when it was in home port, we'd make breakfast and lunch, and then close of business hours was about 4 p.m., 1600. So there would be we I would shut the kitchen down about 2 in the afternoon after lunch, clean up, hang up my uniform, and become an Italian the rest of the day. Uh,
nice, nice.
so that was fantastic. A hardship duty, it was not.
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna rephrase what I said earlier. I said general instead of an admiral because, got the army on my head.
I cooked for
Um
generals as well.
Oh, you did?
Well,
What
yeah, I mean, it was the one of the it's five or six total fleets the uh, military, the U.S. Navy has. So you got to imagine there's a three-star admiral, and then there's the uh, captain, or it would be colonel level,
okay.
uh, be as the chief of staff, and then most of his top brass were colonel and captain commander levels, 05, oh 06 in the mess. But then you have task force and all these other uh, uh, tangential commands. So, and people coming, dignitaries coming and going. I cooked for royalty and
Wow,
generals and admirals visiting foreign military staff quite frequently.
wow. It's impressive. It is impressive. I think a lot of the chef, army people that I know, they pretty much have just been on barracks. So yeah, to be able to cook at that level and like you say, royalty and things like that, that's pretty cool to experience that. And how long did you do that for? Was that a couple of years that you did that posting for?
I spent 2 years in the barracks duty and 2 more years in as a the admiral chef, and then no, the total 4 years in Italy, but that was between '99 and 2004,
Okay, okay,
and of course that was the same time when all of a sudden we went from peace into two wars. And of course, it began the transformation for me from finding those internal skills and core values, the things that besides the tuition that I wanted in my 4 years and get out and become a chef.
mm,
And of course, I found more of the external values like duty, right? That sense of being a part of something larger than yourself, that teamwork. And with the two wars kicking off, I was the hardship. My job that I was doing, floating around the Mediterranean, and every once in a while going into a port and running up the flag and throwing a reception for the local, government and all that. Uh, I was watching these wars on television like everybody else. And everybody's got a role to play in the military. That's everybody's job is important. I just realized that yeah, I have skills, talents, abilities, intellect that I think exceeded my role as a cook.
Okay.
So that's when I started looking for other opportunities.
Yeah. And in doing that, how was you kind of finding out what other options are out there? Was you looking elsewhere in the Navy, or was it always going to be another service?
Well, I first volunteered to deploy to Afghanistan, and this my first deployment was in 2006. Uh, and I was still a Navy cook, so I went from cooking for the admiral and his staff to cooking. It was in Farah, Afghanistan, cooking for 3 to sometimes 600 or more ISAF
Okay.
troops. And ironically, or coincidentally, there were about 3 platoons of Italian special forces on our fob. So I got to practice the lingo I'd learned for 4 years in the middle of an Afghan desert, and trade those MREs for blocks of Lavazza and Ely, espresso.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it was definitely different. But that's when I met some EOD technicians, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. These guys were outside, in the gravel parking lot, dumping out all of their tools and equipment from their armored truck and doing maintenance checks on them. So they had their bomb suits and robots. It was like a cool guy garage sale, yard sale. And I walked up, I just started up a conversation with them, learned about the tight knit brotherhood, that community within the community, the technical aspect of the job, the fact that they're life savers, they're first responders on the battlefield, everything about it.
That
Just
is
told
cool.
me this was it.
That okay. That makes sense with where that spark came from with switching over. Now before we dive into that, what was your mindset, if you can remember back to, like you say, going from 4 years within Italy to then deploying overseas to Afghanistan? What was your mindset? Was you excited to do something different?
I was. I was. The more I appreciated the service part of military service, right? To be in it for a greater good, right? To actually give of myself and be willing to sacrifice. A lot of people, they volunteer knowing that there's danger, but just like me, I was in it for selfish reasons. I mean, that's not a bad thing, but uh, over time, the more I made it less about me and more about the service and my brothers and sisters in arms, and the mission, the better I felt about myself, the better I felt about my job, and the more excited I was to get to work each day.
Yeah, that's cool. And you also mentioned about, signing on for the 4 years. So when you knew you wanted to stay on a bit longer, do you have to extend like a contract within the US Army, or how does that work with like staying on longer than you'd initially planned?
Well, at right in a school, 1999. I'd only been in a couple of months between basic training and the A school, maybe about uh, half a year or so. And I'd actually gotten top of my class, and they offered me this, what they call it, advanced uh, petty officer, or it was an early promotion. But what it
Okay.
came with was 1 year extension. I thought, well, I'll get paid a little bit more, have a little rank, and it's just one more year. And I get to go to Italy. Okay. So then instead of 4 and out, it was I'm 5 and out. That's it. No more.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, by the time it came to choose again, I was raising my hand and yeah,
Okay. So it's just like an extension on an extension. It's really interesting because in the British Army, you essentially, when I joined, you signed on for a 22-year career, but you could do a minimum of like 3.5 when I initially joined, and then you
Hmm.
could say, right, I'm out. We've given them a year's notice. So it's just really interesting with how the US Army does it, US Navy does it, where you kind of have these like smaller contracts, and you kind of can extend as you do different things. I just think it's really interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, it's different between enlisted and officer. They have to request to resign their commission, so it's not guaranteed that they'll be released. Additionally, with enlisted ranks, once the military has invested enough in you and you've reached a certain time, my last enlistment, I enlisted in Afghanistan, my third deployment, second time to Afghanistan, and that was at the I think it was about the 13 or 14-year mark. And your military ID has an expiration date, the end of your contract. Mine just said indefinite or
Oh,
indef.
okay. Righto, righto. So let's come back to you're in Afghanistan. You're as a chef, as a cook. You see all those amazing tools, that brotherhood of the EOD team, and how do you start taking that step forward into that field of the military and transitioning from the Navy over to the Army?
Well, in the Navy, everything can be done with a simple chit, a request. There's like a single form for just about everything to initiate, right? It's a request form. We just call it a chit. So I scribbled on a chit in the most proper, uh, red tape, penmanship I can do, uh, requesting to what we call strike or change rates, change jobs from uh, CS to EOD, which wasn't actually a rate. It was more of a special qualification, like a suffix.
Hmm.
So they came back promptly denied. One was
Oh wow.
they didn't take there's certain source rates, and they just didn't take cooks into EOD. It just wasn't a thing. There would be gunners mates and bosun's mates and electricians, or the other things that made sense. Also, my rank as a cook was undermanned, and next rank up was overmanned. So they didn't want me to change jobs. They weren't letting me go in anywhere, and they weren't going to be promoting me anytime soon. At the exact same time, that first deployment was nearing an end, so was my contract. So I had a decision to make whether to stay on as a cook and be a petty officer second class in for who knows how long, or did I hang up the uniform, let the contract expire, and try somewhere else? And that's what I did. I hung up you know, the Cracker Jack uniform, and I went and found myself some camis.
Really? Okay. So if I get this correct, you actually left the military. You left the Navy.
Yeah, I there are cross branch programs, green to blue, blue to green type of thing. But essentially, it is leaving one branch, ending a contract with the Department of the Navy, and starting a contract with the Department of the Army.
Wow. And so when you do that and you go down that route, does that mean you have to go back to basic, and drop down to the private rank?
Well, I had gotten out and moved to New York City. For about half a year, I was a civilian,
Oh, cool.
and that didn't take. Uh, for one, being a country boy, I got claustrophobic. Two, didn't really enjoy it, and I really missed the service. And I had this bug that I needed to go EOD. So I went to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn, New York. I talked to the recruiter. I said, I want to go EOD. Here's my service record from the Navy. And of course, this is 2007. And of course, Iraq and Afghanistan are busy. They definitely needed more EOD techs. So they welcomed me on. I got to keep my rank. And at the time, they didn't send me to Army basic training. They had this pilot program for, it was like a gentleman's basic training. Uh, all of the physical fitness and knowledge based, skills, not the indoctrination type of thing.
That makes sense. But really cool and interesting that I in some ways gave civilian street a go, maybe because you didn't have that option to do that internal transition, and that's kind of what I thought when I kind of like saw what you did during your service was like an internal like transition over. But the fact that you were a civilian for 6 months was kind of that's kind of interesting. So when you did that period of time with getting used to the army life, did you feel a little bit more like you belonged there? Because you said that you were kind of looking for something a little bit more to coincide with what you've got inside of you, those skills, that determination. So how did you
That's
feel when you were there?
that's a great question because yes, I definitely felt like a fish out of water, so to speak. I still had salt in my veins. I loved being a sailor. Loved it. I loved being out at sea. I loved the old traditions that we still hold back from what we carried over from our British cousins. Uh, and I love that kind of stuff. I love the old history and the old tradition. And the Army has it too. But uh, I have since I'd come in with some rank as a non-commissioned officer in the EOD field, I had to learn really fast. So we kind of skipped right past a lot of the general army stuff I would have been learning coming up as a private and focused entirely on becoming an EOD team leader because the operational tempo was really high. They needed team leaders. They needed the guys to get into the bomb suits and lead their teams. So and the job is an extremely challenging one. So every day I was learning ordnance. I was learning IEDs. I was learning the leadership aspect. Uh, but I think at heart I was always may always be a sailor. I
Now,
tell people I really went from Navy to EOD.
that's fair. That's fair. Now, when you said you kept the rank, what is the equivalent rank in the army for what you were in the navy?
So I went from petty officer second class to sergeant.
Okay.
Basics, it's a basic sergeant. The but because of my time in service, it wasn't long before I was promoted to staff sergeant, which is E6 level.
Wow. That's pretty cool that they allowed that to happen, in a very positive way. So you're there learning EOD stuff because that's difficult. The EOD technician, as far as I'm aware, is it's very technical, learning so much about all the possibilities that are out there. Um, I'm guessing there was education. I'm guessing there was exams you had to pass, plus learning about the Army's ways rather than the Navy's ways. So yeah, is that like a 6 month kind of period of time where you're going through all these courses, or how long is that?
In total, the training for US EOD school is about a year long. Each branch has their phase one, which is about 10 weeks. And then they go to the joint. Interesting enough, it's a Navy run school on an Air Force base just down the road from where I live here. And that's about 43 weeks.
Wow.
So you're looking at a year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
what
go on.
we tell, because I became an instructor, we tell all the students is this is just where you learn how to be an EOD tech. You really get the education when you get to your unit.
Fair enough. And so after you pass all of that and you become an EOD technician, is there another bit of pride inside of you? Do you feel good because from what you initially got that taste out in Afghanistan of what the team can do? How did you feel personally?
Well, it's yeah, like I said earlier, it's like being in a it's a circle within a circle. Much like the special forces or other uh, you know aspects, kind of like a fraternity among the military. EOD technicians, they all train together. They all speak the same language. We each branch has its own specialized jargon, uh, and there are so many jokes about what one word means to all different branches. But when you put on that EOD badge, everybody speaks the same language, and
Hmm.
there's a reason for it. Because when we get out on the field, we might get paired with an EOD technician from another branch, and there can't be any confusion. And of course, it's like running the gauntlet for a year. We take these written and then practical tests. We take a test on average every 2 to 3 days, and um, 84% is a failing grade because you don't want an EOD technician on the battlefield that got a C average.
Mm. Wow, I didn't know that, but it kind of makes sense to make sure that you are updated and definitely informed. So yeah, that's a good share. Thank you so much. Once you pass everything and you move on to your first unit, whereabouts do you head to?
Well, after I got through my own EOD training, they sent me to Fort Drum, New York, which is way upstate on the St. James River, um, and right by Canada. And it's utterly frozen for much of the year. Because of the Great Lakes, we get this thing called lake effect. So uh, we just get so much snow dumped on us. And as soon as I got out of EOD school, I joined an EOD company at Fort Drum that was, we'll call on the road to war, doing all the train ups for deployment and preparations. And we were training to fight mostly IEDs in the desert. We were training for that in 4 foot snowbanks.
Wow.
So it was definitely an interesting transition, but the pace never slowed down.
Mm. And after you have joined your team, you mentioned about the learning of IEDs. When's your first deployment? Is it pretty soon after you arrive there?
It was only a few months after I arrived, and usually EOD teams are three personnel strong. We have a team leader and two team members. At least this is the way the Army does it. Again, every branch has their own methods. Uh, but for the Army, it's a three-person team. I was assigned the fourth member, a team sergeant, to a team that already had a team leader, and I was there to shadow the team leader, learn as much as I could from him, and get my team leader certification as quickly as possible, so I could take my own team. The company deployed to Iraq, and we were not in a location that was very busy, very, it didn't have a high op tempo.
Okay.
Some of our team leaders went to the Iraqi Army's bomb school to teach their just EOD technicians, and I was assigned to the the Joint Task Force there, Task Force Troy, and the Counter Explosives Exploitation Cell. So I left the team and went to do what's called triage uh, at the sexy cell. Um, and it's basically where all when EOD technicians, they have a few different roles on the battlefield. Of course, remove and dispose of the explosive hazard, but if, for many of these IEDs, we're also the crime scene investigators, the CSI on the battlefield. So we collect evidence and send it up to those the task force that we had. There's so many of our civilian intelligence and policing agencies there: FBI, CIA, ATF, DEA, you name it. So this evidence gets seen by a lot of high-ranking eyes. I went there and learned how to present the intelligence, right? How to create the storyboard, create, present how to handle evidence and present it, and
Mhm.
that was a huge benefit when I actually took my own team.
Yeah. So when you're out there and you're learning all of this, how does it feel to be out there? Yeah, how does it feel to be out there? Because you saw that before in Afghanistan, but now you are actually physically there. Was there any nerves because you might maybe getting involved with some of the EOD stuff?
It was very rewarding, very gratifying in a way, in a very short time because I'd made the conscious decision to be and do more. I was a cook. I had a great role as an admiral's cook, but for the most part, I just cooked. I put heat to food for a long time.
Mm,
And then I decided that I wanted to make more of myself. And in a very short time, I'd gained some rank. I had gotten into a critical job, a career field, and as a staff sergeant, I was giving briefings, not just serving food, but I was giving briefings to generals and colonels, and also and situational. In certain situations, I had command over these higher ranking officers.
mm,
In any hazardous situation, once I take command of the area, uh, that's my command until the hazard has passed.
yeah. It's like it's for someone like me that doesn't know you, but is hearing what you're saying. It's an incredible change of trade of job role in the military, and it's just so impressive that you've kind of hit the ground running and taken on this new role. Did you get involved with any? And I don't know what the right terminology is, so sorry about this, but did you get any hands on with any disposal of IEDs or any bomb threats?
Quite a bit. Not when I was in Iraq. My time in Iraq was actually quite short, so only a few months, and then I returned back to the United States. But I did what was we call it, CONUS, or Continental United States stateside response. So for about just shy of a year, we were answering police calls. We would assist the police whenever there was a marine flare washing up, or there's we're in the Northeast of the United States, which has a lot of history. You'll find cannonballs sometimes, or yeah, I'm sure England has its fair share of old ordnance. What's that old TV show, Danger UXB? Uh, but I did stateside response even when your grandpa passes away and the kids are cleaning out the attic and find some souvenir from uh, Vietnam or Korea or wherever. Anyways, I also do Secret Service missions. So anywhere a protectee traveled, EOD would also clear that scene. So I switched to another company. I did stateside response, and then I deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. And that's when it was very hands on. Uh,
Cool. Well, before we go into Afghanistan, I just wanna cover, that bit that you spoke about. So stateside response, working with all those different areas. I do feel this is an area where maybe other bits of the military that's not EOD, and definitely probably in the UK, the civilians don't really understand with how much the military supports the country when it comes to that kind of stuff. Because we have that over here in the UK as well. When something happens, it's usually the military gets called in rather than the police because they're busy doing other things. So that's pretty cool to experience that. Did you enjoy your year and all the stuff you were called out to?
oh yeah, I loved it. Getting to work with the local police, with the FBI, with Secret Service, and had huge respect for our law enforcement officers. And uh, yeah, and sometimes I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's like a gag. It looks like a pineapple grenade, but it says "complaint department." Take a number, and it's attached to the ring. We literally get a call for these desk souvenir things,
Wow.
but all the same, I it was a pleasure to be of service, whether it's overseas or right at home.